This is the MacBook Neo, Apple's newest entry-level MacBook, and it is by far the cheapest MacBook ever made by quite a margin, coming in at about half the price of the new MacBook Air. And the real kicker is it runs on the A18 Pro chip, which is the same chip you'll find on the iPhone 16 Pro. So that begs the question, how good can this MacBook possibly be? Let's ramble.
Hold up, place go wild when I pull up. They all on me like it wants.
Alright guys, so let's unbox this thing really quick before we get into the nitty gritty, because I do think the design is definitely one of the highlights of this thing. Not just because of the funky color palette Apple went for this time, the Neo is available in silver, blush, citrus, and indigo, but also because of the fact that Apple managed to maintain the premium materials and build quality we're all used to. Because of the advancements in manufacturing technology, the cost of production of these recycled aluminum enclosures, as well as mass producing the A18 Pro chip, has lowered enough to make this a viable option, even at this lower price point. Now, I did buy this thing with my own hard-earned bones. I'm pretty sure I'm on Apple's naughty list. I've been known to be quite critical of them, so I'm not expecting them to send me review units anytime soon. On the upside, I guess that's a good thing for you guys because I don't have to worry about saying anything to stay in Apple's good graces. All right, let's open this thing up. And honestly, guys, no matter what Apple product, the unboxing never fails to amuse. It is one of these things that Apple just nailed down to a T. Oh, this is interesting. I actually haven't seen this before. I don't know if you can see this, but it actually says hello, like it does on the introduction screen. So it's a fun little touch. And there you have it, the citrus color MacBook Neo. Now, I do really like the way this looks and feels. This does not look or feel like a budget laptop. You know, like many of the Chromebooks do. This feels like a premium device. Now, granted, your typical Chromebook will be sitting at an even lower price point than this new Mac, but at a starting price of $599 or even $499 if you're eligible for that student discount, the actual build quality of this thing is definitely deserving of some credit. This color is a little different from what I expected. I guess I thought it would be more of a yellow or goldish color like the previous iMac, but this definitely is citrus. In other words, it's more like a greenish yellow than an actual yellow. I kind of dig it though, and I think it's also a very nice touch that the background is actually matching to the color of the MacBook. I'm assuming this is the same for the other colors. Right, so if we take a little tour of this thing, at least looking at the visible external hardware, you'll find that the Neo is a pretty bare bones affair. As you can see, there's no MagSafe charging. There is no Thunderbolt ports, just two USB-C ports and a 3.5mm jack. I do appreciate that. Sometimes I do prefer using wired headphones for certain things like editing. Now, in my head, I was gonna say, that's probably not so relevant for this particular laptop because I'm not going to be using this for editing. But that wouldn't be fair to say because from what I've seen, this thing is actually quite capable of editing. Maybe not, super complicated edits with lots of plugins or, color grading. But if you want to get into some editing, maybe you want to start your own YouTube channel or do some stuff for social media, this thing supposedly is pretty good. I'm obviously going to be testing this in my full review, but from what I've seen, this thing can actually handle quite a bit more than I would have expected. Anyway, like I said, from those two USB-C ports, only one of them is a USB 3 port capable of 10 gigabits per second speeds. The other one is only a USB 2 port, which most of you know is painfully slow, maxing out at only 480 megabits per second, and that is really a shame. I believe USB 2 ports have no business being on any laptop in 2026, let alone a Mac. But hey, let's remember that this is an unprecedented price category for Apple, making the barrier to entry into the Apple ecosystem significantly lower, and some things will have to give. I just wish it wasn't this thing. What else do we see on the outside? We have two side-firing speakers, one over here and one on the other side. And it has a dual microphone array, which Apple claims does offer voice isolation. That's kind of nice. It does have a 1080p FaceTime camera, which is nice as well, since I do think the Neo is heavily marketed at students, so online meetings will be an important use case. It does not have center stage, no desk view, or any of the other fancy features, but I guess that's not really a deal breaker in that student kind of context for most people anyway. The display is a 13-inch one, a standard liquid retina display, which is still a solid display, more or less the same display you'll find on the new MacBook Air models, minus the True Tone, which is absent from the Neo, and it offers sRGB, not the full P3 wide color gamut you'll find on the Air. And there's no 15-inch option available on the Neo either. It tops out at 500 nits of brightness, just like the Air models, which in my opinion is a bit on the dim side, especially if you plan to use it outside. But inside a library or a coffee shop or a dorm room, 500 nits will obviously do just fine. What's interesting is that despite being a bit thicker than the iPad Air, it is slightly more compact than the Air. Let me just actually grab my Air to compare it. This here is the M4 Air model, and you can already see when you hold them side by side that the Air is slightly larger. It's a bit thinner, not much thinner, I have to say. It is definitely smaller. So like the thickness is almost negligible. I would have thought this was a bit thicker. Anyway, the result of this is that both machines are exactly the same weight. They come in at exactly 2.7 pounds, which is almost a full pound lighter than the MacBook Pro. Now, you'll notice that this MacBook Neo does not come with a charger. It comes with a cable, but there's no brick in this box, and that is because I'm based in Europe. If you are in the US, it will come with a 20-watt USB-C power adapter, which might not sound like a lot, and that's because it's not. Unlike the MacBook Air, that's capable of charging at 70 watts, or the MacBook Pro, which tops out even higher at 96 watts, the MacBook Neo does not feature fast charging at all. I mean, you'll probably be able to squeeze out a little bit more charging speed if you hook it up to a faster charger, but it won't be much, and it will definitely be significantly slower than its bigger brothers. It does, however, have a solid battery life at 16 hours, which is only 2 hours less than the MacBook Air. Now, of course, this is theoretical battery life under the best possible conditions. I'm anticipating it to be closer to like 9 or 10 hours in real life, which is still very solid and should easily get you through the day. By the way, I will be reviewing the new M5 MacBook Air for you guys as well, so do hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. That'll be much appreciated. What you won't see on this version of the Neo is a Touch ID button. You'll just see this lock button over here. Oops, coming on again. I obviously haven't set it up yet, so we'll be doing some time traveling back and forth as I'll show you the B-roll of the machine. But yeah, review life, am I right? Anyway, I went for the base spec, which is why there's no Touch ID button. And the reason why I did pick the base spec of the Neo, which is 8 GB of RAM, 256 GB of storage, and the A18 Pro chip, which of course comes in all models. It is worth mentioning that this is, by the way, a binned version of the A18 Pro chip because it has one less GPU core than the iPhone version. I'm not sure why Apple did that, but that's just the way it is. I went for the base version because I do think that this is the spec that will be most appealing to its target audience. But yeah, that does mean it comes without Touch ID. You can get Touch ID, but that means upgrading to the higher 512 GB storage option, which increases the price by $100. And while I get that every dollar counts when investing in what is essentially a budget device, personally, I would say if you can spare the extra budget, if you have the wiggle room, go for it, because I think it'll be money very well spent for the extra storage. So 256 gigs isn't really that much these days. Upping it to 512 makes a big difference. You get the Touch ID, which is also great because, as we all know, Touch ID is no longer just there to lock and unlock your computer. You can use it to log into websites, validate purchases, all that good stuff. So definitely a very useful feature to have. But there's another reason, and that's probably the most important reason in my opinion, why upgrading to the higher storage option might be a good idea, and that is memory swap. This Neo comes with only 8 GB of RAM, regardless of the spec you choose. So if you're doing any kind of multitasking, chances are you're gonna go into memory swap pretty quickly. For those of you who don't know what that means, in a nutshell, it means that when your computer runs out of RAM, it can use some of the SSD to complement that RAM, giving you just a bit more headroom to work with. And in that case, more SSD storage is obviously better. Unfortunately, neither option will give you a backlit keyboard, and that's a bummer, especially for students who tend to spend a lot of time working in pretty dim environments, at least I did in my day. The trackpad, by the way, does not have force feedback. It is nice and big, as we're used to from Apple, but it is a multi-touch trackpad, meaning it physically clicks, but there's no haptic motor in there. A few words on connectivity. The Neo does feature Wi-Fi 6E, not Wi-Fi 7 like the Air and the higher end Pro models. I'd say that's not really an issue right now since Wi-Fi 6E is still plenty fast and Wi-Fi 7 modems are not that common yet, but if you plan on keeping this thing for the next couple of years, it is definitely something to consider. It does have Bluetooth 6 on board, which is the same as the higher end MacBooks, so that is pretty nice. All right, so let's run a quick speaker test and a mic test, keeping in mind, of course, that how the speaker audio comes across on these videos is influenced a little bit by the mics we're using, as well as YouTube's compression. Okay, so the image is, I guess, what you would expect from a 1080p camera. Let's do a little audio test. The arsonist has oddly shaped feet. The Human Torch was denied a bank loan. Alright guys, I'm really curious what you guys think about the audio. Let me know in the comments. One last important thing to mention before we try to get to some kind of conclusion is external display support. Because of the lack of the Thunderbolt ports and the single USB 3 port, the MacBook Neo only supports one single external display, and that external display will be capped at 4K 60Hz. So even if you have a monitor that is capable of more, like the Pro Display XDR, that will be as good as it gets. Having said that, it's kind of wild to see this Neo hooked up to my Pro Display XDR and just work. Anyway, if you're hoping to run a dual display setup or even more, you're gonna be out of luck with this one. The Neo does simultaneously support the built-in display at full native resolution, so you will be able to run your external display as a secondary display, not just a mirror display, and I guess that way you can kind of get that dual display setup anyway, as long as you're happy with one of them being a 13-inch monitor. So guys, who is this MacBook Neo for? Well, if you need to run specific tasks or run very demanding apps, you probably already know this isn't the one for you. If you're making money using your computer as a professional and that's your professional tool, I would also not recommend getting a Neo. But if you want to get into the Apple ecosystem, maybe coming from another platform, or you're on a budget, you're a student, or maybe you have a kid in school that needs a solid laptop and you don't want to splurge on, a high-end one just yet, the Neo will be a really compelling option in my opinion. It looks and feels premium, typical Apple design, cool colors, great battery life, and theoretically, it is plenty powerful to serve as a basic, pretty solid computer for non-power users. I will be testing this thing in way more detail, of course, because as I said before, it looks like this thing can actually handle a little bit more than we might want to give it credit for on paper, and I'm really curious to see how hard we can push this base model. If you're interested to know whether the Neo could be a good computer for your kid, also be sure to sub to the channel because I did order one for my 10-year-old, soon to be 11-year-old daughter, and I gave her instructions to write down everything she likes and doesn't like about the Neo, and we will be reporting back to you together to talk about these findings. Guys, please give the video a like if it was useful. Tune back in for more content and future reviews on these new Apple devices. Thank you guys for watching and see you in the next one.